I'm Councillor Louise McKinlay. I am the Deputy Leader of Essex County Council, and I'm also the portfolio holder for communities, which includes responsibility for libraries.
Councillor Wagland.
Hello everyone, I'm Leslie Wagland and I'm the Cabinet Member for Economic Renewal, Infrastructure and Planning.
And we've just lost Juliet at the moment. I'm just trying to get Juliet back in. Did you want to introduce Juliet on our behalf, Councillor McKinlay?
So Juliet Pirez is our Head of Libraries and she is joining the session today. She can obviously answer any management questions that may come forwards. So hopefully she'll be able to come back and join us soon. Is there anyone else, Joanna, to introduce? Can we proceed? The sound's gone.
I'll now start the presentation. Oh, there's Juliet.
Oh, there's Juliet. We've just introduced you, Juliet.
Hello, everybody. Yes, I'm Juliet Pirez. I'm the Head of Libraries.
Thank you. Okay, just before I turn to the presentation, I just wanted to give you a little bit of background about today. So this is the first of a series of engagement sessions that I'm going to be holding. There's another one later this evening, as I'm sure you're aware, but then there will be other opportunities for people to put forward comments and views and ask questions. So we're going to be putting the slides that I'll be going through shortly online after obviously we've had these sessions, along with some FAQs. We're expecting some particular themes and groups of questions that will come forward. So any that we don't get to answer today, we will make sure that we pick up outside of this. In terms of the focus, I'm keen that we have this early engagement before the draft is published, so that we can talk about the approach that we're looking to take to libraries and the future of the service within Essex. So it will be with that in mind that we'll be focusing the presentation today and receiving any questions. So if it's operational or library specific, we won't be taking those questions today, because as I say, this is about the approach to the service and how we're looking to then move forwards with a draft that will be shared later on in the autumn. In addition, some people have put forward some questions beforehand. And in some cases that has been helpful if it's been obviously quite detailed questions, enabling us to get some of the finer detail in terms of the response. But of course, as has already been said, we are very much welcoming questions to come forward as I proceed today. So do pop them in the chat and they will then be grouped or looked at, and then I will obviously do my best to answer them or pass to one of my colleagues to do the same. The other point I just wanted to make very quickly is in terms of how we're going to do this. I'm going to start the presentation by giving a bit of background about the service, what we've got up to during the last 18 months, which have obviously been very different. Then moving on to the approach to the new vision for libraries within Essex, and then moving into the Q&A session at the end. So I look to do that as quickly but as clearly as I can to enable as much time as possible for questions or comments. Okay, if we can turn to the presentation, please. Thank you. So in terms of the slides themselves, you will see that they have quite a lot of content in them. Whilst normally I obviously wouldn't give a presentation like this, I'd be using the slides more for reference. It is important that those who aren't able to join today and who view this online can obviously put the slides into context. So you will see that they are, as I say, more highly worded than you would usually be. So forgive me if at parts it seems that I'm reading through them, but I just think it's important that we make sure that the detail is as available as it can be to everybody. So just very briefly, 74 libraries, we've got two mobile libraries, obviously the online service, which you'll be familiar with, and a home library delivery service, which is provided by our volunteers. And that's really crucial to those who otherwise wouldn't be able to come into the libraries and access the services. Next slide, please. So in terms of our library service, it is the second largest in the country, as you can see, serving approximately 1.5 million people. This summer, a big piece of news for us was joining the UK's largest library consortium, which gives Essex residents access to an additional 6 million titles. That really has been quite groundbreaking in terms of the offer for our residents, and working alongside the 18 other library authorities does mean that we can give residents in Essex a much greater opportunity to be able to access the titles that otherwise may not be available to them. And then we've also upgraded our library management system, which improves the access to the library services. And as you'll see, this has improved the compatibility with the mobile devices and a new app, which can be downloaded onto mobiles. Next slide, please. So whilst books are clearly at the heart of libraries, the service that we offer does extend far beyond what you might think of when we think of a more traditional service. And across the network, we offer in addition to the books, we've got the ebooks, e-newspapers and magazines, novels, research for family history, events and groups, which I know many of you partake in, signposting to other services, class visits for schools, summer and winter reading challenge. I'll come on to that in a bit more detail later. All through events and activities, internet access, Wi-Fi, etc., and health and wellbeing support and information. Next slide, please. So staff training and development have made the commitment that all of the libraries within Essex will be run by library staff who are paid staff by Essex County Council. And part of that is that strong commitment to that staff development. So we're making sure that we have well-equipped libraries, but in addition to that we have our staff who are well trained and also have the relevant qualifications, and that they are reflecting the desires of the local community in terms of what it is that they want from library staff. So in some cases that might be helping them with Bookstock, but it's also, as you saw on the previous slide, about signposting them and having a much broader understanding of what the library service offers, and indeed what I believe it can offer into the future. Next slide, please. So our volunteers have, as I said, made the commitment that we will be staffing our libraries through paid staff, but we do have to recognise and pay tribute, I think, to just over 200 volunteers who take part in a range of opportunities within the library. Our home library service, which as you've seen is very much run by them. The Summer Reading Challenge, over 500 volunteers, particularly young people, helped us deliver the Reading Challenge this summer. And that is really important, not just in terms of enabling us to deliver the Summer Reading Challenge itself, but in actual fact what that can mean for the young people as well and for those volunteers. And we saw particularly over the last 18 months where work experience and part-time jobs have been very hard to come by for young people, that when I was speaking to them, they were very much seeing this as an opportunity for them to build up their CV, get some experience, whether that's to go on to back to school, to college, to university. So a much broader offer that we can put in place here, where it can help with the Summer Reading Challenge, but also very much make a difference to some of those young people within the county. The Duke of Edinburgh Awards scheme, involvement in some of our other activities, some of our very popular rhyme times, code clubs, computer support, and in some cases this has enabled us to extend opening hours as well, as you can see there. Next slide, please. So our library service during lockdown, like for many of us, the world was turned upside down, and we had to very quickly adapt and look at what that meant for the service and for our communities. So developed over 100 virtual sessions, which included obviously the rhyme time and the rapid rhyme time, children's author events, children's creative writing workshops, various craft sessions, and there are over 100,000 views, with that number still growing. Some of the face-to-face school class visits have been adapted for online sessions, as have engaged live with primary children via Zoom. And we also attended the summer reading assemblies via Zoom, the number of primary schools. Our library staff and volunteers continued with the home library service during lockdown and carried out befriending calls. And as I'm sure you appreciate, that was particularly relevant and helpful to those who were potentially isolated during what was clearly a very difficult time. We've also promoted our e-resources through various social media platforms, created a podcast on how to keep on reading, and extend access to some family research tools for people to access from home. Next slide, please. So we've introduced a really different offer to promote the services. The service including activities like mindfulness sessions aimed at new parents and children, and this is very much fitting in with our approach to wellbeing, free theatre events that promote books and reading, clearly with not just from a social perspective, but from the point of view there of supporting literacy. And we've widened our outreach activities. So for the first time this summer, when we held the holiday activity food camps, which provided 330,000 sessions across the county, every borough, city and district took part in it. And we had fun activities that took place during the school holidays for youngsters primarily, but not exclusively primary school, where they were given a hot meal as well. But we linked in the library service and they went out, read some books. There was work to bring the authors to life, to bring the characters to life, and to think about what that can mean in the much broader sense. So that was the first time we'd done that. So that went very well. It was very positively received by both the youngsters, the parents and the service as well. And that's just one opportunity where I think we seized it, looking at a broader offer that we were giving the community during that time and how libraries can play a part in that. And that's something that I'm going to touch on a bit more shortly. Our Reading Friends scheme helped those, again, who are experiencing isolation, and particularly successful, as it says here, with Colchester Refugee Action. We've run our Essex Book Festival. It's 12 events, 11 in person, 1 online, over 330 attendees. And numbers obviously limited due to social distancing. And our libraries were one of the first in the country to reopen in-person services once we were given the green light to do so, and that we deemed it safe and with all the requirements in place. So it's been a tough time for all of us, and certainly for the service, but very much looking at how we could keep that communication going with local communities, and looking more broadly at just the traditional book service and thinking what it is that the communities needed and what role the library service could play in helping to achieve that. Next slide, please. So I've mentioned our summer reading challenge. It was fantastic with 17,000 children taking part. The theme was the World Wildlife Fund, a special nature themed reading challenge, helping children to learn more about the nature and the environment in a fun way. And as I've mentioned, 500 of our volunteers alongside our staff helped us deliver that. We are going to be putting in place a winter reading challenge for the first time as well, trying to bridge that gap between the summer and obviously the Christmas and the winter, to understand what it means for some of our more deprived areas, how that can then link in with literacy, link in with the schools, and to think about the broader piece again that libraries can play when we talk about building back and literacy and supporting some of the schools and young people in their missed learning. How can we as a service support what fantastic work parents and schools are doing to help those who have maybe missed out? It's an obvious place to go to, and I want to be able to deliver more than just one-off reading challenges, and to think about what that can mean broadly across Essex, but also as we progress with our levelling up agenda, to identify what that means more for specific groups of people and targeted work within particular geographical areas as well. Next slide, please. So highlights of our upcoming calendar. I've just mentioned the reading challenge, the Love Your Library Days, to really promote and encourage people to go into their libraries. The family learning fairs in partnership with ACL and Talk, Listen, Cuddle, that's been run before and has been very popular, and has we've had some extremely good feedback on that. The Talk, Listen, Cuddle, with the focus being obviously on children, being able to sit down, build that bond with them, get them into reading, and to think what that can mean in terms of school readiness and just supporting general development and literacy, particularly with little ones. Silver Sunday, Black History Month, we're going to be holding a series of events within different libraries around the county to promote Black History Month, thinking about what that means, and highlighting some of the great work that is being done that we would want to all rightly be proud of, and looking at again how we can use the libraries to really promote some of that. Are there opportunities there, not just for displays, but for us to actually link up with some of the other community groups and to really promote a better understanding and to foster those relations throughout the community. Reading well, mindfulness, I mentioned before that we're looking at a slightly different approach to encouraging library use as well, where we can look at people in the round and their well-being, and that those mindfulness sessions are very much part of that. Next slide, please. So that was just a quick run through in terms of the library service, obviously through COVID, and what we've got planned over the coming few months. And I hope that sets the scene really in terms of our vision for libraries going forwards. And this really is the crux of what the start of this conversation today is about. So if we move on to the next slide, because I'm going to take you through how we will be looking to approach this vision for libraries. So as a council, you may be aware that we obviously back in May after the elections that we launched the new administration with the broader aims of renewal, equality and ambition, with climate change and levelling up very much at the heart of what we're doing. And the broad offer and the broad ask around all of that is that within the council services that we consider how they can be used to forward some of that agenda. So what does that mean for us? How do we then work with our partners, our communities and residents to help improve life chances and to address some of these issues around climate change as well? And for me, libraries really are at the heart of that. I've said before that I don't believe that libraries are at the centre of all communities in many cases, but I think they absolutely can be, and that's where I would like to see them. So the work that we're going to be doing and the approach that we're going to be taking when we share the plans later on in the year, we'll show you how that commitment and we'll show you what it is that we're going to do to invest in the libraries and to think about how we can use the service in a bit more of a freer way, I suppose, to think about what that broader agenda is and what it is that we can do to help achieve it. The next slide, please. So I'm very much splitting out around 3 pillars. The first, which I'm terming service delivery. So understanding what that core offer is. Obviously, it's about books, whether that's hard copies, whether it's ebooks. Thinking about the footfall into the service, both online and the new digital offer that we can put for people as well. And thinking about how it is that the library service can continue to offer and support communities through the provision of books, ebooks and other titles and material. The second pillar is about the improvements to what I'm terming the library infrastructure, and that here comes really into 2 parts. One being online Wi-Fi, access to Wi-Fi printers. What does that mean? What does that look like? How do we make sure that the library infrastructure is upgraded to meet the modern day needs? How can we encourage people to come in with their laptops and just settle down and be able to do some work there? What does it mean if a student wants to come in and do some research? Have we got the facilities on offer there for them to access it? And then the broader piece around libraries infrastructure, which essentially the buildings. So have we got buildings that are fit for purpose? Are they in the right place? Have we got, are they welcoming? Are they in need of a refresh? Are there opportunities for us, and this is where my colleague Councillor Wagland comes in, are there opportunities for us from an Essex housing perspective to think about how we could actually make more of a library site that may help to generate housing or other opportunities within the community, which can also therefore mean that we can use the libraries and house the library alongside either other services or looking at what that means for the broader offer to the community. So when we share the plans later this year, it will come along with a 4-year proposal around for each library in terms of that infrastructure and what that means, so that people can see when their local library is going to be painted or invested in, what that may mean, and appreciating that some of that will be lighter touch, but also accepting that some of it will be more fundamental, as we've seen in places like Shenfield. And then the third point really comes back to what I've been alluding to throughout all of this, which is how we can use libraries, whether that's the building or the service, for our wider agenda, particularly around climate change and levelling up. So supporting communities and families. How do we improve opportunities for people? What does that mean for the different geographies around the county? What does that mean for different groups of people? So we know that the libraries themselves are very different, and we know that the needs of communities are very different. So how do we get that balance around a more pan-Essex offer, but also appreciating what the local needs are and how we can use the library to help forward? So what I believe are quite ambitious plans in terms of the levelling up agenda and helping young people, older people to make the most of themselves. How do we also reach out to people who are not using libraries at the moment? All of us want to see libraries used more, whether that's the building or service. And therefore, we need to start speaking and understanding why some people or many people are not using their libraries. What do they want to see? What is it that's stopping them going in there? So we can then adapt the offer and the service to what they're telling us, so we can look to increase the footfall back into the libraries and back to the services. Next slide, please. So this is the final piece really in terms of update and next steps. So as I've outlined at the outset, we've got some early engagement today, which is designed to show you the approach that we're taking and how we're looking to think about the library over the next few years. What does that mean? What approach we're taking? What are the parameters? What are the considerations? And it really is along those 3 pillars that I just outlined. We will be doing some more of these sessions. I'm keen that we get to people who aren't using the library at the moment as well, so we really understand what it is that they want. We'll then obviously take all of that on board and seek to do a draft plan that would be around back end of September, beginning of October and through to mid-November, when we will then again go back out and share through the public consultation, the official consultation, what that looks like for the libraries. And then considering what those responses are to the consultation, reviewing it, analysing it, seeing what messages we're getting, what's viable, what's not viable. And then later in the first part of next year, finalising it and signing off. And there will be various opportunities throughout that for people to understand what it is that we're saying, for them to feed in, ask questions and also give feedback. I will also be, as part of that public consultation between mid-November and January, holding more of these sessions where I can take some direct comments and questions as well in terms of what it is that we'll be consulting on. So I hope you can see from that the broad approach that we're taking, as I mentioned, the 3 pillars, but also the commitment to engage early on, to share the vision in terms of where we're looking to take the service. As I say, this is still early days. We're not looking to answer, have all the detail and have all the answers today. This is going to be iterative. It is about us sharing the approach, doing some work, hearing from the public, and then going through that formal consultation period. But hopefully that gives you a flavour of where we're going and how we're looking to approach it. And I think at that point, I will wrap up and move on to some questions. Right, okay, the first question.
Hi Louise, if you open your chat, you should see a list of questions in there's an order that's come through.
Right, yeah, some good questions here. Okay, the first is from Nick. Heritage facilities, museum spaces to be integrated across the Essex Library network, office space for community organisation groups in starting phases. Linking libraries with the borough to build a critical mass for, say, poetry, reading and groups. So what we're absolutely looking to do there is to think about how we can look more broadly at what the communities are saying they want to do, they want to see, how they want to use the libraries and what that can mean. So where we have got heritage facilities or there is museum space, is there an opportunity to integrate that in? What does that mean? What does that look like? Office space for community groups as well. We have to get the balance around that because I very much want to see people able to come in, settle down their laptops and be able to get on and do some work, but equally recognising that these are not offices, they are libraries, and that we need to make sure that there is therefore a provision for people to come in and have that access, but equally that people can come in and obviously use those facilities more broadly as well, and for what we may determine a more traditional offer of the library. The next question is from Jean. What about setting up children's team books clubs? There's having regular events for primary children, and could a teen zone come into some libraries? And I think that's a fantastic idea. We know there are a number of book clubs that operate throughout the county, and many of them are just set up and run privately amongst groups of friends or local people. You're absolutely right. We do have more of a focus on young children, and I think it could be great to see older children, particularly teenagers, coming in and being able to come together and work on that. And it might be that it could help with things like GCSE work that they're doing, if they're reading the same books, it could support some of the schoolwork. So I think that would be a great idea. I am going to see if Juliet would like to comment on that, because she's obviously very closely connected to the libraries, and to see how that could maybe work.
Thanks, Councillor McKinlay. Yes, I mean, we'd be really keen on setting up a programme of events for children of all ages. As you say, we focused a lot on, you know, setting up our rhyme times, but we're looking at children for all ages and looking at what we can do for teens. We have had teenage reading groups in the past. And I think they, you know, they need a lot of work and encouragement, but I think, you know, I'm really keen to set those up again.
Thank you. And while you're there, Juliet, do you want to say a few words about Silver Sunday? Because we've had a question come in from Maggie on what Silver Sunday is.
Yes, so Silver Sunday is a national day. It's taking place on the 3rd of October this year, and it's for people of all generations who can come together, and we'll be running some activities for older people to sort of help them, you know, understand the library service. We can promote our services, get them to join, and we'll be doing displays and materials and activities for them. So we'll be, you know, advertising that later on.
Lovely, thank you. I'm also seeing a number of questions about whether the libraries are staying open and the staff. So I just want to take this opportunity again just to reiterate, because it's being asked in various ways, and we've had a couple of questions come in ahead of the session. The libraries will be staying open. They will be run by paid staff who will be trained and obviously supported as members of ECC staff in the way in which you would expect. In terms of volunteers, I absolutely see that there is a role for volunteers in supporting our library service. They do some fantastic work. I mentioned it earlier in terms of some of the outreach work that they do, how they've helped us with the Summer Reading Challenge and what that can mean for them as individuals and as groups as well. So that's something that I want to recognise and very much encourage and promote. But that to me is very different to volunteers running libraries instead of paid staff. So the libraries will remain open, the staff will be paid, and the volunteers I hope will continue to flourish, but will be very much alongside our paid staff and working with us and helping us to put on events and promote the libraries and the broader offer within the communities as well. So the questions are coming in very fast now. I'm going to try and get through as many as we can. There's one from Emma. How will the public consultation take place? Will it be both online and paper? And if paper, will this be available in the library this time? And why has it been set for November to January? So the public consultation will be as broad as we can make it. Yes, it will be online, and there will be opportunities to feedback in written copies as well. I can certainly look at putting it in the library. I think that makes sense. I would actually like to make it broader than that as well, because as I say, I want to reach out to people who aren't using the libraries. So by definition, putting it in the library obviously isn't going to work for them. So thinking about how we could work with colleagues across the piece, working with some of the local businesses to be able to advertise that the consultation is underway, to try and get as many people to feedback as we can. And we are also exploring some opportunities of being out and about, so stopping people in the street, finding out whether they use the library currently. If not, why not, and to see what that means, just to try and make it as broad and inclusive as it possibly can be. In terms of November to January, I'm really keen that we progress with this as quickly as we can. I'm not worried about not having responses from people. I think, you know, online that covers off any time of year. People do obviously still go out and about, and we will be finding ways to get into different groups, different clubs, and really encouraging not just those who are communicating with us now, but encouraging others to be able to go out and share the message in terms of the consultations as well. We've got good links in with a number of community groups and organisations as well, so we will be pushing it out and encouraging them as much as we can to really come back with their views, and also talking to councillors, so making sure that they are on the ground in their local areas, giving people the opportunity to be aware of it and then obviously feedback. Another question coming in now from Andy. Are all libraries sufficiently large enough for additional services, or will the library service have to look to relocate to libraries that may be too small? So there's a balance around all of this, and I know there's been much discussion around, you know, if a library moves, is the footprint the same, is it bigger, is it less? And I think we've got to really look at how we're using the libraries. So in many cases, the libraries that we have are not in good places. They may not be particularly central. The building itself could be, you know, relatively dilapidated, or certainly not in the up to the standard that we would expect and want it to be. So I think it's about, you know, being realistic about where we're at now with where we're offering some of the service, and thinking about if there are other opportunities to relocate that service. But there has to be a balance around that. And if we're going to look to bring other services in, then obviously space is a premium, and it is something that we need to consider. But I don't think we should just go down the line of what the square footage is, because in many cases, the libraries are old, the way they are laid out. Some have plant rooms, which wouldn't be available now. If you were having a more modern building, the boilers can be much bigger. And if you are relocating or if you're modernising, you know, we've got the opportunity to obviously upgrade everything that comes with that. So the space itself can be better used. And for me, it's about what the offer is. Now, of course, there's a line around that. We're not looking to take a big library and put it into a cupboard, but there has to be a sensible conversation around what else can be considered when we're looking at where we locate those libraries. So in some cases, obviously, we're going to have to limit what else can go alongside it, but it may not just be something physical in the library. It might be about signposting. It might be that it's about bringing groups into the library around some wellness sessions. It doesn't have to be that it's big, you know, swathes of people coming in, taking over big areas. And we need to think about how we can get other people into the library. I keep coming back to that. All of us on this call want to see libraries used more and the library service used more. So we have to reach out to the people who are not using it currently. And to do that, we need to understand what it is that they want, and then make sure that we are providing it in a way in which they can access it. So the whole thing is a balance. I'm not expecting every library to be the same, because obviously they're very different. They are different in size, different locations, communities they service. But we do have to think about what that service is, and not just focus on how much space in terms of square footage the library has.
Can I just add to that, Councillor McKinlay, that I think a lot of our partners as well have moved their services. You know, things have changed since the, you know, last year, and some of the partner services have become virtual. So it might be that they don't actually need a huge physical space anymore in the library, and we can work with them to provide access to their services virtually, and working in partnership with them. So I think there's lots of opportunities there. Also, we do have to think about the days that the libraries are currently closed, and there might be opportunities there for people to come in and to use that space while the library's closed on our closed days.
Yeah, really good point, Seth. Thanks, Juliet. I'm going to ask Councillor Waggling to come in on the next one, because it's about housing stock. Who will own the housing stock built over the libraries or on similar sites? Maybe just like to say a few words around how that works, please.
Yes, indeed. And Louise, perhaps I could just quickly say that I would absolutely endorse the wish that we all have that people respond to the consultation fully. I'm a huge fan of consultations. They tell you all sorts of really interesting information. And I think it's a shame sometimes that a message can grow up that nobody's listening and consultations don't change things. I've seen at least 3 or 4 different things changed by consultation, so I'm a huge fan of getting that sort of response. And just another very quick point about space. Some of the libraries that we've been working on at the moment, we're actually looking at improved amounts of space, aren't we, Louise? We've got somewhere where the space available for traditional library usage will actually be bigger. In some cases, it will be more efficient in the way that Louise has indicated. Moving on to the issue of tenure, some of you know that I'm a lawyer, that's where I came from. There will be a number of different ways in which the library buildings are actually held themselves. But where we are building residential properties, for example, above a library where we're redeveloping, renovating that library so that it can be used better and we can use what we achieve by way of the residential. There will be units which will be sold privately. Interesting how many inquiries we've already had from people in different parts of the country who want to downsize, would like to have a flat in their existing communities but can't, and would love to live over a library. Really interesting what we're getting back on that. So I think you will find that there will be some which will be what the law would call long leasehold. So they will be the equivalent of ownership in a flat environment, and there will be some which will be dealt with in a slightly different way, involving independent living or social housing, because we're very keen to have the opportunity to enable all categories of our community able to access those sorts of properties.
Thank you, Councillor Ragland. The next one I'm going to hand over to Juliet. It's a point well made in terms of social isolation, the difference that libraries can make. And when the opportunity for people to come back in and read newspapers will be put in place. It's obviously been hampered recently because, for obvious reasons, but when will we be able to encourage people back in?
Well, we are encouraging people, obviously, to come back in now and start participating. We've put all the furniture out again, and part of that will be our newspaper offer. Absolutely want to encourage people to come back and sit and relax and enjoy the whole library service, including being able to read a newspaper.
Thank you. The next set of questions, some of these were pre-submitted, so I'll just run through them and then answer them. Will ECC make every effort to improve the book stock in every local library? So obviously we've just joined the Consortium, which is, as you heard when I went through the slides, that gives us access to just over 6 million titles. There is also a budget each year for book renewal and also for purchasing new titles. I am currently reviewing how we can open that up more to the public to have an input. So at the moment, we obviously have members of staff who go through where some of the requests come from. We've got a lot of data in terms of which titles are borrowed, etc. And on the back of that, decisions are made, which, as I'm sure you'd agree, makes absolute sense. But I am keen that as we move forward with the new approach, that there is an opportunity for members of the public to put forward not just individual requests for a particular book, but to actually consider how that money is spent and what that can mean. And that again comes back to what it is that comes out through the consultation that members of the public are saying they want from the library service. We have that budget there. It's about £7 million over the next 4 years, so it's very sizable to think about how we want to spend that, and then to think about what that looks like for each of the local libraries. So there's an opportunity there for us to work more closely and again to recognise different communities. Is there any question about restoring and extending opening hours, including Sunday where there's proven demand? So I'm absolutely open to looking at the opening hours, and again mindful that it can look different in different areas. The key is proven demand and what that's for and what that can look like and what else we can get from it. But that's absolutely something that we will be looking at through the work over the coming weeks. I had a question here about introducing a fines amnesty to build back library use. I have asked the service to look at this, but there is very limited evidence that this actually makes a difference to bringing people back in. And as I've said a number of times, I think we need to look more broadly at not just those who are or have been using the service, but those who aren't. So we're looking at it, but whether we go ahead with that, I will obviously share the thoughts on that at a later date once we've finished that. And then just finally on this row here, a suggestion that we could run a locker service like Amazon do. I struggle to get to the library to collect all the books during your opening times due to work and home commitments, but this would mean I could collect them any time of day or night with a unique code, and I think that's a great idea. That's just about, isn't that how we kind of all live our lives these days? Isn't this about modernising a service, recognising that whatever hours we have, that not everybody, they won't suit everybody, that it is about people being able to access the books and making it as easy for people as we possibly can to reserve a book and pick it up. So, I think that's absolutely something that we can look at. I think that makes really good sense. Moving on to a question or a comment, I think it is from Joe. I love that I can pay printing fees on a debit card. The login into the library computers is a bit clunky, so I'd love to see Wi-Fi printing in the near future, especially in the big busy town centre library branches. So would I, Joe. When we're talking about modernising it, I mean, Wi-Fi printing is pretty standard. So there is a big piece that we have to do about making sure the Wi-Fi connections are at the level that we would expect them to be. And as I said when I was outlining the 3-pillar approach, the infrastructure of which I would see Wi-Fi printing coming in as part of that. So I think there's it's just modern living, isn't it? So from Katie, are you concerned that nobody has had normal access to libraries for the best part of 2 years and that this may affect the response? Will you take this into account in your analysis? Some children, parents and older people may not have been out at all in this time. Yes, so for the purpose of any doubt, when we look at library use and trends, I fully appreciate that the last 18 months are not reflective of you know, how we would have lived our lives normally. So anything that is looked at in that regard is absolutely caveated. What I would say is that I do think the last 18 months have changed people, and they have changed how people in communities are living their lives. So, you know, people, I'm doing this from home today. I'm sure many of you are listening from home today. The opportunities for being, you know, remote working, office-based, not so much as it has maybe been in the past, does mean that people will use their local facilities or have the opportunity to use their local facilities, including the library, in a way in which they maybe didn't in the past. You know, when people were getting on trains and going up to London, or dropping the children to school and going off to the office, and that would, you know, could very much sort of conform to regular office hours, that it doesn't give people the same flexibility that many are now seeing. So I am absolutely aware that obviously the numbers have been very different, and in that regard would be limited in terms of how much credence we give to them. But I do think we have to look as well at how the library use has maybe morphed and changed, just like everything else over the last 18 months, and thinking about what it is that that, you know, that people want. And again, this comes back to the consultation, with people coming back to us and telling us what they want from their library and how they've used it. I've got one from Andrew. The sole 10-point plan and background was sent to me. How do I respond to it? So obviously thanking you. I think it's positive feedback. There's much there where there is a lot of common ground. I will be going through it and responding in due course. You'll appreciate that since we've announced these sessions, that a lot of questions have been coming in, a lot of comments have been coming in, and we will be filtering through them all and obviously providing responses in the best way we can. But I think overall, it's a broadly speaking, I think it was a positive document, and I hope from what you can see from what I've said today, that there is it's a lot there where we are aligned. Popular question, are we going to be reducing library opening hours? So it's absolutely not my intention to be reducing library opening hours. No, we want to increase the use of the libraries. If I look across the piece, and I say this as a resident in Essex, as a taxpayer of Essex, as somebody who uses their local services, I don't think any of us want to see that we are all, collectively paying for and having libraries and buildings that are closed for half of the week. That is not a good use of the building, the land, our money, or any of the above. So it has to be about increasing the use of the building and of the service. That's where I want us to get to. I don't think we can just do it through the traditional way. We've seen that doesn't work. The facts are the numbers have been dropping off over the past few years. Even if you take COVID out of it, the numbers have been dropping off. So we need to accept that and recognise it and think what it is that we need to do to try and turn that tide and encourage people back in. So closing the libraries for more hours is not going to help us achieve that. It has to be about us looking much more broadly across the piece, thinking about who else we can work with in terms of our partners, and looking what else it is that the public is saying they want to see within the buildings and from the library service. I've got a question here from a councillor in Prettygate. Our library is central to the facility. We are able to offer our residents. What would be the views about the possibilities for volunteers or others approved by ECC to be allowed to open facilities for use by community groups outside normally accepted library opening hours? So that probably comes back to what I was just saying about how we can work with partners and how we can look much more broadly than just the traditional sense of the library being open for books between A and B. We've got to think about that outside the box as well. And I think if we have got partners like the borough councils and like a number of organisations and local groups, that there is absolutely an opportunity there for us to think about how we can make them better used and more accessible to people.
Can I just add, Councillor McKinlay, that when we reopened in April, we did look at our opening hours, and we we sort of got rid of our lunchtime closures, which can obviously be inconvenient, and we opened every library all day on a Saturday now to encourage, you know, parents and families in on Saturday afternoons. And we also made sure that we have now got one library open till 7 o'clock in every area. So hopefully we can build on that. That actually resulted in an extra 48 additional hours opening a week.
Great, thanks, Juliet. And just while you're there, we've had a question in about the library consortium. So we've mentioned this a couple of times. It is about providing access to another 6 million titles. It's about us working with 18 other local authorities where we can share access to the different titles that we have. But I am being asked about whether most of these are duplicates that are scattered around the county, whether it's books. It's obviously broader than just books, but I just wondered if you could give a bit more detail around that, please.
Yeah, I think it's about giving access to those 6 million items of stock. Obviously, if somebody reserves an item of stock, we would search in Essex as we would do now before we went out to the consortium. And obviously, we're just monitoring the use and where we need to increase our stock so that we satisfy the Essex residents first. And I think, you know, at the moment it's a new service and we're building on it, and we're getting some really good results and feedback from it as well.
Thanks, Juliet. I've had a couple of questions coming now about communications, which is probably something I should have picked up earlier because I did want to say something on this. I've said this to Juliet before, so it won't come as a surprise. I think we're really bad at how we promote and shout about what it is that the library service does. I think there's some fantastic work that goes on in the libraries. Much of it they just get on with. There's many community groups. There's a lot of outreach work, a lot of initiatives that are taking place. We've got very dedicated staff, but I do think that historically we've been really bad at promoting that. So from a communications perspective, there is absolutely going to be a piece around how we can upgrade that, how we can shout about it a lot more, and how we can promote what's happening. And I mentioned before about working with partners, and that is really important because, you know, it's fine for one or two of us to, you know, retweet or put something on Facebook, but the more people we can actually engage with, not just to share it on social media, but the more of our partners actually have a stake in it because they're working with us and helping to promote the service and helping to use the building, the more we're going to get the message out there. So, you know, we have to look at how we are promoting what we're doing. Suggestions come in from a lady called Hannah about, we obviously have the Pan Essex, I think it's a Twitter or a Facebook handle. Could we have something that's more localized as well, so that when there is very much a local event going on, that could be publicized and, you know, pushed out through the local chatter groups? I think that's a good idea, and that's something that we can look at. If we did it on a sort of borough district basis, I think that could work well. And I think, you know, these are all really good ideas. You know, communication is everything, isn't it? And if we move ahead with this whole new approach where we have got, you know, collaborative working within the service across the council, but crucially within the community and with partners, then it is about how we tell our story, and it is about how we can promote that in a, you know, succinct and but also comprehensive way as possible. Question here about the consultation. Can we make the final consultation open and transparent, e.g. avoid leading questions? So we have, obviously, as I'm sure you'd appreciate, staff at Essex County Council who are very well versed on how they put together consultations. There are standards which we adhere to, you know, everything from how long we can consult on through to how we phrase it, and some really good comms teams who can support that as well. I think inevitably somebody will always have a view on a question about whether it's raised at the right time. It's, you know, it's a bit like holding a session like this, isn't it? You do one during the day, you do one after work. There'll still be someone that says, I can't make it, it's at the wrong time. You will never please everybody on this. But what we can make sure we're doing is following best practice, and that we make sure that that consultation, you know, is clearly going to be open and transparent, but that we're equally pushing that out as far as we possibly can do. And that really comes back to what I was just saying around, you know, some of the communication and the opportunity to really improve and push on that. So a question here on Bookstock. How will the budget be spent on new Bookstock? Are we just relying on being part of the London Consortium, or is there a commitment to keeping our Essex libraries well stocked? So I mentioned a few moments ago that we have, over the course of the next 4 years, there's some £7 million that's there for to support stock and to think about what it is that comes out through the consultation in terms of what people are saying they want from their libraries. So we're not just reliant on the London Consortium. No, this is Essex County Council budget. It is about thinking how we spend that for our libraries and making sure that that is reflective of what people are saying they want from the libraries.
Can I just add to that as well, that we've also, we've now got a new stock maintenance tool that will help us really drill down into what starts working really well in each library, and we're going to be able to move stock around the county so that it may work better in a different library. So our stock is going to start working much harder for us and provides us with more value for money.
I've got one here from Maggie. The vision for the service is very commendable, but how is it going to be funded, paid for? So we are currently within the County Council, not just talking the library service, but looking at a 4-year budget. That takes us obviously through the whole of the lifetime of the administration. We have already allocated money for the service, and I think it's also about how we're having those discussions in terms of how we're going to use that money, and making sure not just that it's more transparent and open, but that it's actually enabling communities and local representatives to have more of a say on what that means locally for their library. So we have been very, very clear that the commitment is there for the library, so it will feature as part of a 4-year plan. But that money is just one part of it. I do think it is also about how we are looking more broadly, as I say, at our wider agenda, particularly around climate change and levelling up. And there are a number of initiatives that we can use the libraries for to really promote them. So on climate change, what can we do to really, competitions for youngsters, what does it mean on a sort of borough to borough basis in terms of how we can start to really encourage local initiatives, local community groups, raise awareness, and at the same time encouraging the footfall into the library or using the voice that we have to promote some of that wider agenda. So it's not just about the money, as I say, that will be there over the 4 years in terms of us putting that budget together, but also thinking more broadly about how we use the service in a much more joined up way, and whether that's the climate change, whether it's levelling up, and just thinking about what that looks like. Got a question here about 14 months ago, I phoned your customer service telephone number mid-evening out of usual working hours and was very surprised when the phone was picked up by someone located in the US. She was very pleasant and answered my question on the new restricted opening hours of my local branch. To save money, will you be cancelling this contract for people located in the US? I think that's probably would have just been an individual from the States rather than it going directly to the States. We don't have a contract out there with people, so I'm not sure what that refers to. Hannah, I love Essex Literature Festival. Will this continue? Are there any plans to grow or develop in the future? Juliet, do you want to come in there?
I think this may be referring to the Essex Book Festival.
Book Festival, I
yes,
think, yeah.
And absolutely that we will be partaking in that. We've just finished that this year, and we will be taking part in it again next year, definitely.
Great.
Can I just pick up on Joe's comment, Councillor McKinlay, about the library being applauding ourselves for being a green service? I absolutely agree with that, Joe. We're not just using and recycling books. Our books that we do decide to dispose of go to a company called Better World, which does recycle them as well. And we also are available, we give out the green bin bags. We're absolutely supportive of the recycling agenda and the climate change. We have taken in old laptops, we take in recycled back, we take in batteries to discard of, and obviously our printing service is really important because that encourages people not to have a printer at home but to come into the library. Our ink that we use is recyclable, our ink cartridges are recyclable. So I think Joe's right, we need to promote that more.
And I think that's probably a really good example actually around where our comms can be improved. And sometimes I think for a service that is doing a lot, it doesn't always come naturally for them to really shout about it, but that's absolutely where we need to get to. So I think it is about making sure that people are aware of all that we're doing. I love the suggestion earlier about having a more sort of localized social media piece where we can promote what's happening in local libraries. And as I said, sort of share it out on local chatter pages to try and just spread the word, but encourage people to then be able to come in and use them and to recognise the libraries are more than maybe what they would have been 20 years ago. I think we've got time for one more question before I just look to wrap up. This is probably more for you actually, Juliet. What plans are there to upskill the library staff, particularly around IT skills? We have had discussions around skill sets and what that means. But maybe you'd like to say a bit more about that.
So obviously with the new library management system, our library staff have recently just been through some upskilling of their IT skills, learning the new system. We've also got new self-service machines in place across the county. So staff have had to learn how to, encourage customers to use those, and the contactless payment systems. We are looking at introducing tablets and more mobile devices for staff to be able to use, and that will obviously come with training for staff.
Thank you. So we've only got a couple of minutes left, so I'm going to wrap up there and just talk about the next steps and where we go from here. So firstly, thank you to everybody for attending and for the questions and the comments. I think they've been really productive and certainly thought-provoking. And it's good to see where we've had some general questions and comments coming in, whether it's around communications, whether it's around library opening hours, etc. So I'd very much appreciate everybody attending today and putting forward those comments. They will be taken forward and taken into account when the formal consultation is done later this year. As I said, we're calling this an engagement session because it was more to share with you the approach that we're looking to take, and to underline some of the approaches and the concepts that we're looking to take. So the libraries remaining open, the ECC staff supported by volunteers and by communities, recognising that there is an opportunity for each different area and communities to actually feed into what their local library can look like and to play a part in that. I'm keen, as I say, that we broaden the discussions around titles and books, and we'll be thinking more about how we do that practically, but then also recognising that alongside the service that there is investment that's needed in some of the buildings and also in the infrastructure around some of the IT as well, and that we'll be planning that over the next 4 years. And then finally, this pillar around the broader approach to how we can use libraries and start to position them more at the heart of what it is that we're trying to achieve, whether that's through different initiatives or whether it's libraries being more reflective of their local schools, their local housing areas, and to understand what that can mean for those different areas around the county. Essex is a big place. There's a lot of us and we all live in very different areas, and therefore I think things like libraries, as much as you could have a universal service, and we have the Consortium and they are great, it's also important that they are positioned locally and that people can understand what that means for them. So it's just the start of the process. We will be doing more of these, as I say. I've got another one tonight. Just wanted to bring you in early. So thank you for being the first ones to attend. And I would encourage, if you've got friends, family who you think would be interested in hearing about this, that they can obviously do so tonight. And particularly non-library users, because they're the people we really need to get to here. If we're to increase the use of our libraries, we have to get to the people who by definition are not using them now. So I will leave that with you, and I look forward to obviously sharing the findings of the work that we do and the feedback that we have, and then when we put out the draft later on this year, we will be holding more of these sessions for questions and comment then. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.